Welcome back to the Pastel Pony Podcast. Today is Tuesday, November 1st, 2011, and I'm Vos de Sueños. Hello, every pony. Today we have a ton of stuff to go through. The very first thing that I wanted to cover here in episode 9 of the Pony Podcast is submission guidelines. Anytime some pony asks me to read a story, I'm just going to point you to this. Because I get tons of requests, and I often am choosing fics that I prefer. So, there are a lot of fics that don't really appeal to me, which make it very hard for me to make good recordings. As a result, what I'm going to do from now on is, when I have the time, I will hold a contest. Because as of right now, I've got about 10 requests, in addition to all of the ones that I'm doing myself. And a lot of those are fics that I normally wouldn't read, and therefore wouldn't record. So, the rules for submission are revised, and they are as follows. If it is a self-insert, you can almost be guaranteed that I'm not going to read it. If you have an OC pony that is yourself, I am not a fan of those fics. I will probably not read it. However, during the contests, what will happen is, I will, instead of being the judge, I will simply step back from the process, and I will have you guys do it for yourself. You can put forward a story you want to see or your own story, but you cannot vote for your own story. If you do, I won't count your vote. You must convince at least 2 other people that I should be the one reading that story. And that's how the contest will work. People will vote either via message, you can PM me if you need to, or you can vote directly in the comments when I have these contests. So, if you want a fic read, post it in the comments for this episode, and then try to convince every pony else that that fic should get read. Whoever wins, I will do my best to get it done in the next couple of weeks following the contest. This is contest number 1, starting now. Any fic that has been requested up until this point, I am ignoring. You will have to resubmit it and convince people, bronies, ponies, that I should read it. It will go for 2 weeks, because as of right now I have Past Sins 4 and My Little Avengers Chapter 1 recorded. I will also probably record it after Past Sins 5 and release it the week after. So, that is how long you have. In addition to that, I will not have any of the previous standards that I had before for fic requests. However, I will only take fic requests during the contest, and only the winner will get read. Because there's a lot of content out there, guys, and I don't have time to read all of it. I'm getting very busy, and I've already got a good 20 things in the queue that I want to be reading, in addition to all of the things you guys are requesting. So, that being said, I will do my best if you recommend me a story. If I like it, I've got no problem reading it and adding it to the queue. But that's far different than you requesting a story that I'm just not all that interested in reading. I will be much better at producing good requests if I know that people want it already. So, that's the deal. That's contest 1, starting today, ending in 2 weeks, and to be recorded thereafter fairly shortly. That's the deal, folks. That's how all of the requests are going to work from now on. Basically, democracy. Pony democracy! Yay! So, requests for reading aside, what else do we have today? First off, someone mentioned Cupcakes the Musical, which, terrifying as it is actually pretty amazing work. I will post a link in the description, and anyone who wants to check it out can. Thank you to Mr. E380. While it's not the grimdark that the original story is, it's got a lot of really good musical work, and it tells almost the entire story from start to finish with nearly a full-length soundtrack. So, another thing I wanted to mention was the Gnerd Podcast, which is a podcast by gay nerds. The G is silent. Nerds. Tell your friends. One of the best things about this is their very second episode, they talk about My Little Pony. Interestingly enough, both of the guys that are on the show seem to have been with it since before G4, which makes for a rather interesting and unique perspective on it. If you guys want to look it up, it's Gnerd Podcast. And in addition to that, they're also somehow connected with the people who do the comic Briar Hollow. So, that's cool stuff. Next, we have what am I doing for next week? Obviously, since I'm doing Past Sins every other week, next week is Past Sins Chapter 4. But it's the next chapter of Past Sins, and since I didn't get it up this week, the week after will be My Little Avengers Chapter 1. Next, I wanted to talk about, as of this week, I don't actually have anything in the stories I'd like to see written category because I honestly spent most of the week working and then reading. Beyond that, for the review this week, O Octavia posted the next 2 chapters and is starting to really delve into the author's personal view of her backstory, which is really cool. Some Pony had actually mentioned her possibly being Pinkie Pie's sister, and in this fic she is, which is a really interesting spin on stuff. I also started reading Fellowship is Magic as per one of the requests I had last week. My personal request, not one of yours, unfortunately, but it's interesting, to say the least, because the way that they handle it isn't a Lord of the Rings ponies, it's the ponies are actually companions to the Fellowship. I also started reading Ponygeist, which was a single one-shot where spoiler, Twilight plays a practical joke on everybody on Nightmare Night. And speaking of which, happy Nightmare Night to everyone, even though it's the day after. And beyond that, the last 2 things I got a chance to read this week were Mythbuckers, which takes the main 6 and starts a Mythbusters-style show with them for pony myths, and it turned out to be quite amusing. And The Nightmare After Nightmare Night, which is sort of a crossover with The Nightmare Before Christmas. It's cool stuff. It's dark but not too dark, and it's well written. You should check it out. Finally, I suppose the last thing that we have to talk about today, now that we've gone over the weekly review and the musical and the requests for fanfic readings in the Gnerd Podcast and all that fun stuff, I actually had a shout out from one of my listeners to Mobius, who's in my room right now.
What?
Yeah, somebody actually requested that I give a shout out to you.
Now, why is it someone want to give me a shout out? I've only appeared on 2 of your podcasts.
I don't know. They must love you. You're just so... You have that smooth, sexy voice, and also you're very dark and angry. And people love dark and angry. You're like Batman.
Get in the vent.
That was terrifying. Well, happy Nightmare Night to everyone. Have an excellent week. This is Vos de Sueños signing off. Also, the image you're seeing right now is my pumpkin.